Hey everybody, it's John Barrows with Make It Happen Mondays. Thanks for joining me. Happy Monday. Hopefully you all had a great weekend. I did. It was my daughter's 7th birthday, so that was a blast. We had about 70, 80 people here over at the house, and we had an American Ninja Warrior course set up, which was actually super fun. These people came over and set up this whole course in our backyard and had kids running all around and keep them busy. But that was Saturday, and then Sunday. Went to the Pats game, so brought my daughter to her first home Patriots game, which was fantastic. She's already been to another game, but the home game was a special treat for her. So we did the whole tailgating thing and everything else. But super excited just today to talk a little bit about networking and going to networking events. And I want to make sure that we're still on here, but it looks like. Yep. All right. Good to go. All right. So I wanted to talk today about how to get the most out of networking events. All right. Now, as always, feel free to ask whatever questions in the chat forum here. I'll answer whatever you have. This is really more for you than anything else. So I'd love to go back and forth with whatever questions people have, topics that they want to discuss, but usually kind of pick a topic here and riff on it for a little bit, and then I'll open up for Q&A. And the reason I wanted to tap into networking events is because, first of all, I've been to 2 or 3 conferences over the past few weeks here. And, there's some that I prepared for and there's some that I didn't. And obviously the ones that I prepared for went a lot better and I got a lot more out of them. And just in general, networking events, for those of you who aren't going to them, and I don't just mean the conferences. I think the conferences are a form of networking event, right? But a lot of people go to those conferences to learn something from the presenters and don't really look at it as a networking event itself. I'm talking about networking events that are in any one of our local communities. Like all you have to do is go and do a Google search on, Boston business social networking events and see what comes up, or go to the Chamber of Commerce or the local business journal or something like that and look to see what events are happening in your area. Because the importance of these, if you go and you find business, that's fantastic. That to me, but I never looked at them that way to say, okay, I'm going to go find a client that I can close here to hit my quarter target or anything like that. I looked at it as a fantastic way to practice, because especially for those of you who are inside sales that are looking to move into outside sales or field sales, networking events are the perfect area for you to go practice in somewhat of a safe environment, right? Because everybody's there for the same reason. It's still awkward to go introduce yourself to people you don't know, but at the end of the day, it's a great place to practice. And there's some science behind this as well. The way that we communicate as human beings is broken down by 8, 35, 57. 8% is the words that we use, 35% is the tonality and how we use those words, and the other 57% is body language. So if you're doing all phone sales, by the way, you're only dealing with about 47% of the way that people communicate, right? I'm sorry, 43% of the way that people communicate. I'm not a math major. But anyways, that's why it's hard to read people over the phone, obviously. That's why email is even harder, because, reading tone into email is a dangerous thing. But networking events, by going to a networking event, you are seeing everything. Like, you are seeing how people receive your message. And so when somebody says, John, what do you do, right? Because that's the way they typically work. You go in, you grab, your name tag, you just give them $10 or something like that, and you walk around, you start introducing yourself. Hey, nice to meet you. What's your name? What do you do? And then you give them your pitch. And if you give them your pitch, if somebody asks you, hey, John, what do you do? And you just regurgitate to them your elevator pitch or whatever it is, and you watch their eyes glaze over, or you watch them look right around here instead of here in your eyes. Or if you watch them drink their beer a little bit faster than they were drinking it before, which is my little trick for getting out of shitty conversations. Every time I always walk around an event with my beer about, quarter filled. And anytime I'm in a crappy conversation, I'm like, hey, I got to grab a beer. I'll be right back. All right. So if that's happening in front of you, what do you think's happening over the phone? Right. So events like this give you the opportunity to practice engaging with people and reading people. And it's, like I said, it's the perfect transition to field sales. And so I wanted to share kind of my approach and some tips to get the most out of them. First of all, I would go to at least one a month. Okay. I used to go to 2, 3 a week. And by the way, as a sidebar here, the relationships that I developed by going to those events and meeting people and networking and sharing business, those are still some of my strongest business associations today, all right, 20 years later. So outside of the relationships that you can develop, the key is, like I said, practicing and getting the most out of them. And so, the tips that I'll share with you here, I also have a document that I'll add to this where you can download it. It's just a 2-page doc that'll walk you through the process here. But the first step of any of it is really identifying which events are good to go to. Now, I think it's good to go to almost any event that gets you out there and get you practicing, but some are way more valuable than others, let's put it that way. You don't want to go to an event that's completely off topic or completely out of your realm, and there's no relevance because, yeah, you'll practice, but you're going to practice with people who aren't really going to care at all with what you say. So first and foremost, go do a scrub on a monthly basis of, again, the local business journal. Just do any online search for, networking events in whatever your local town is, and then take a look at those events and see what the target audience is. Who are they looking to attract? And ideally, it's your target profile or people like you who at least sell into the same space. So it's SMB focused, if it's enterprise focused, if it's software focused. What is it? Is it executive focused like VPs, or is it more sales reps? What is it? Figure out what that profile looks like. And then I would even reach out to the organizer, right? To say, before you sign up for it, reach out to the organizer and see if you can get a few minutes on their calendar, or send them an email and say, hey, could you give me a general breakdown of who tends to go to these events, and your last event, how many people showed up, right? They're probably going to lie to you. They're probably going to fluff up the numbers a lot. So I don't know, take 50% of whatever they said. But regardless, you want to make sure that you're going to show up. And again, there's not going to be 5-6 people there. And a previous event should give you a pretty good gauge on what the next event should look like. And so after you figure out who's going to be there, and if there's going to be a decent amount of people there, you can do one of two things. You can go in by yourself, or you can go in with a team. I used to like going in with a team because it pretty much cut my time in half there, because they would take one side, if there was 2 of us, I would take one side, they would take the other side, and we'd both be looking for the same results, but we wouldn't have to talk to everybody there. So regardless, you need to sit down and first and foremost, after you profile the account and see whether it's worth going or not, then you need to just sit down and say, what are my goals for this conference? And you have to be as specific as possible. One is obviously to practice and to get to know how to give your pitch and engage with people. But there should be some more concrete things there, like how many people do you want to meet? How many follow-up meetings do you want to get? And how much time do you want to spend with each person? I recommend having each interaction with somebody being a timed event. You don't actually click the stopwatch or anything like that, but in your head you have a mental clock running for about 5 minutes or something like that, because you don't want to get stuck in a long conversation, hour long, and not get a chance to meet anybody else. And a lot of times when you get stuck in those long conversations, you tend to almost oversell yourself to somebody who might be interested in it. And now what do you have to say for a follow-up? So write down your goals of how many people you want to meet, how many follow-up meetings, you could even go as far as to see how many pieces of business that you want to try to get out of it if you really want to go that far. And then with that, go in and make sure you have your stuff, right? Make sure you have a pen that works, 2 of them I would recommend, a stack of business cards. Sidebar here, on your business cards, if you do have business cards, I know a lot of people don't even have business cards anymore, but if you are going to get them, I'd recommend having a white background on them so that you can write stuff on the back, because that's what I used to do, and I still do, is when I get somebody's business card and I have a good conversation with them, I turn around right after the conversation and I just flip their business card over and I write down the applicable points. So anything specific that we talked about, any information that I was able to gather from them, so my follow-up can be as targeted and as personal as possible. It's not, hey, it was great meeting you at last night's event. So that's a sidebar here. But, make sure you got your materials right. Make sure you got your head on straight. I recommend going in and eating before an event, because nothing's more awkward than, trying to eat and talk to somebody. Unless you want to take the strategy of grabbing food and going to a table where other people are and using that as the introduction. A lot of people who are less confident going up and just straight up introducing themselves to people, they can use that as a little bit of a crutch, where they grab food and they go find a table, one of those stand-up tables that people are mulling around, And you just, hey, you mind if I sit here and strike up a conversation that way? It's a little bit easier getting into that conversation. So you do that, you eat beforehand. Again, I recommend doing that. And then when you get there, I would get there early, because usually earlier there's less people and everybody's just looking to talk, where sometimes when you get there a little bit later, the cliques and the groups have already formed and it's a little bit more challenging. So you tend to, it's a little bit harder to bump into those conversations. So you get there a little bit early, and then you got your goals written down. If there's anybody specific you wanted to meet there, that's the people you want to hunt out. And then you start practicing about how you introduce yourself. And this also takes a little bit of prep of, you got to think about when somebody says, John, what do you do? What's your answer to that? And it's not the elevator pitch, right? The elevator pitch nobody cares about. And if you give somebody a traditional elevator pitch when they say, what do you do? They'll probably leave halfway through your explanation of what your product or service is. So you want to talk, and I train on this called attention grabbers. Like, what can you say in the first 5 to 15 seconds of a conversation to get somebody to say, all right, tell me more. How do you do that? And I go based off of this. I'm sure you've heard me talk about this before, the old school Glenn Ross, right? AIDA, attention, interest, desire, action. And that, again, is the fundamental process of sales. We have 5 to 15 seconds to get someone's attention, 2 minutes to earn their interest, and then we get them desire and action by telling them what we do and having a call to action. So at networking events, we're not trying to sell anybody anything. Well, you can't. I mean, if you could sell your product or service in a 30-second pitch or a one-page email, first of all, you're better than me. Second of all, you're probably selling a commodity, okay? Most of us who sell B2B can't sell our stuff in a 30-second pitch or one-page email, so we got to stop trying. So instead of elevator pitches, I talk about attention grabbers. What can you say in that first 5 to 15 seconds to get somebody to say, tell me more, how do you do that? And so a lot of it has to be contextualized to the person that you're talking to, which is why when somebody comes up to me and they say, hey, John, nice to meet you. What do you got? What do you do? Instead of just jumping in and blurbing out all over them, giving them my elevator pitch that is completely unqualified, if you will, at this point, I tend to qualify them and use that as an opportunity to give my pitch in a way that's most relevant to them based on their role in their industry. So for instance, when somebody says, John, so what do you do? Tell me what you guys are all about. I said, okay, well, happy to share with you that. Just out of curiosity, what kind of company do you work for? And what industry are you guys in? And what's your role within that company? They're like, oh, well, I'm a VP of sales in this, in the SaaS industry, and we tend to focus on these type of clients. Oh, okay. Well, for VPs of sales in the SaaS industry that focus on these type of clients, this is what I do. Versus, COOs in the healthcare industry, this is what I do. And so the idea there is, first of all, you want to put your pitch in context to their role to give them more relevance there. But also what you're doing there is you're qualifying them to a certain degree to see if you really want to spend too much time with them. Because if they're just like, oh yeah, John, I'm a director of IT selling B2C services in the healthcare space, like that's, or in retail, like that's not my target audience. And so, okay, well, then I'll tend to give them my general sales, we do sales training, consulting, but I work mostly with SaaS companies, Salesforce, LinkedIn, Box, those type of things. And, and be nice in the conversation, but try to get out of it sooner rather than later. Whereas if somebody says, well, yeah, I'm a VP of sales in a startup right now. We got about 50 people. We're scaling really heavy. And, we tend to focus on the B2C market. We're trying to really move upstream. Whoa, okay. Now I just realized that this is a prime demographic target for me. So my attention grabber, if you will, needs to be pretty on point, and it will be because I understand that role. And my goal there is to get them to go, oh, really interesting. How do you do that? That's the response I'm looking for. When I tell you what I do, the response I'm looking from you is how do you do that, or tell me more, versus oh. If you get oh, you could have done a lot better. If you get tell me more, how do you do that? I almost want to get somebody to call me a liar, right? If somebody's like, shut up, there's no way you do that. Well, now we're in a conversation. Now we're in a dialogue. Now it's got to be something legit, right? You can't be like, oh, sales training, we cure world hunger. You can't say that. But you can say stuff like, for instance, when I'm at Dreamforce. So Dreamforce is coming up here in about a month, actually. Wow. And that is my exact target audience for Salesforce is my biggest customer. All those SaaS companies are clients that I can work with. And so to a VP of sales in the SaaS industry at Dreamforce, when somebody says, John, what do you do? My pitch, if you will, my attention grabber isn't, I do sales training consulting for Fortune 500 companies that guarantees you the results you're looking for at every stage of the sales process. No, that's an elevator pitch, and that's where people fall asleep. But when somebody says, again, VP of sales, SaaS industry at Dreamforce says, John, what do you do? My response is, I train Salesforce how to sell. And then I shut up and I wait for it. And I'll tell you 100% of the people that I tell that in that format, in that forum, if you will, excuse me, how do you do that? Or how long have you been doing that? And then, so that's my attention, right? I get them with the attention. And then it's, well, I've trained about 5,000 of their sales professionals on prospecting techniques that drive immediate business into the pipeline. It's all about doing a little bit of homework on somebody, coming up with a thoughtful story that doesn't take too long to put together, and firing it off to an executive, right? And you usually got about a 10 to 15% response rate doing it. Interesting. Tell me more. Actually, you know what? Now that I got your attention, I know you're interested. Why don't we take a little bit of a step back and figure out what your situation is and see if it makes sense for us to keep talking here. We're here at Dreamforce. It's pretty much a mess here. I'm sure you're meeting a whole bunch of people. You're probably not even going to remember this conversation a little bit later on this afternoon. So why don't we schedule something next week? Do you have your iPhone on you? I know you do. See it in your pocket. Why don't you take it out? Right? And by the way, I make it awkward on people. Like, when I find somebody that fits a qualifying criteria for me, somebody that I do want to have a scheduled call with, and they show interest, right? Attention, interest. I'm not going to go into my hardcore pitch. Nobody wants that, right? You want to have a conversation with people. And so what I do is I AI and then close on 15 minutes or close on the next steps. And right there, I grab my phone. If they're serious, like right there, I'll grab my phone and be like, hey, you just want to schedule some time right now? Why don't you pick a time next week? Or let me send you an email right now, and we'll connect this way. This way, you'll lock people in. Now, does it guarantee they're going to be there next week? Absolutely not. But is it way better than sending the email out? Hey, it was great meeting you at Dreamforce. I mean, I can't tell you how many of those emails I get after an event like Dreamforce. It's ridiculous, and they all follow the exact same format. So, and I don't respond to any of them. So for me, after an event like Dreamforce or any evening networking event that you can go to, my follow-up, my next week is filled with 15 to 30-minute qualification calls of people that I had good conversations with. And with that, I can keep it as a timed event, right? 5 minutes, 10 minutes at most. I can hit my goals of, meeting 5, 10, 15, however many people, and practicing my pitch to see how it resonates. And I can get more comfortable just getting out there and introducing myself. And so with that plan, again, with that mindset of getting the most out of events, networking events are one of the more powerful tools you can do from a developmental standpoint as a sales professional, and I can't recommend them enough. It allows you to practice. It allows you to make connections. You always want to go in with that giver's gain mentality. I learned this a long time ago, BNI. So if you guys want to get involved in actual networking groups that meet on a weekly basis, the one that started my career was called BNI, which is Business Networking International. Every city has them. Every city has multiple. Actually, I think almost every town has one. And you can go and you can't compete. So if you provide a competing service to somebody else in that group, you can't join that group. So everybody has a different type of service, and they typically meet once a week. And it's a structured form of networking. So what happens is you get in, you give a little 30-second pitch about what your business does. Everybody goes around the room, and then you talk about, leads you have for other people in the room. And the whole mentality there is again, giver's gain. Like the more you give, the more you're going to get back. And I didn't realize how powerful this was early in my career. I was like, yeah, whatever. But I did it because I was always trying to make connections and help people out and do whatever I could and not really expect too much back. And what I've gotten back with that approach has been off the charts. So I think I've told this story before where when I went off on my own with Barrows, I had to start a company. And so, well, actually, when I went off after Basho into Kensei, my first company before Barrows, I had to start a company, and I hadn't really started a company before as far as on my own, and so when you start a company, there's a lot of stuff involved in that. There's legal, there's finance, there's payroll, there's healthcare, there's all these different things that you have to figure out. And for me, because I had done so much heavy networking early in my career and given away so many opportunities, so many connections and helped so many other people out, when it was my time to cash in and when I needed help, every single one of those services was a phone call away. So I'd call up my buddy who was a lawyer, and I say, hey, I need some contractual help. I'm starting my new business. I don't have a lot of money. He's like, John, don't worry about it. I'll take care of it for you. Payroll, John, I'll give you 6 months of free payroll. Let's just get you off the ground, right? And so within a week, I had a website. I had a fully functioning company, and I hadn't really spent too much money or time doing it because all of those relationships that I had and developed and cultivated over the years through networking really came to fruition. So like I said, I can't recommend it enough. If you're not doing it right now, I highly recommend you do. Just get out there. Just get out there and get comfortable. The sheer act of going out and introducing yourself to somebody you don't know and just sticking your hand out and saying, hey, nice to meet you. Tell me what you got. Tell me what you're all about. That alone will build your confidence, and it'll translate over the phone. It'll translate in meetings. It'll translate in everything else. So do some networking. All right. Like I said, I'll put together the one, I think it's a 2-pager here. It's a PDF that I'll put in this post here that you can take a look at. And also from the podcast, you can go download it off the site as well. But get out there, start talking to people, practice. Again, if you get business out of it, fantastic. But if not, don't just go to events and hope for the best or wander around and kind of hope that somebody else is going to make an introduction or stick them. It's better to not even go because, you're wasting time there when you could be doing something else like cold calling or something like that. So if you're going to go to events or conferences or anything like that, go to learn at those conferences, but also go to network, practice, and if you can find some business, fantastic. So it doesn't look like there's any questions for today's session. But if you do, as always, like I said, hit me up on Snapchat, Instagram, Facebook, any of those mediums. Most of my handle is John, M as in Michael, Barrows, all one word. And make it a great day. Make it a great day today and make it a great week. All right. Try to go out there and make somebody happy. There's too much negativity in the world going on right now. So take it upon yourself to go make somebody happy these days and make them smile at least. All right. Have a great day, everybody. Let's go make it happen. Later.